Hello，你好，欢迎回来，Welcome back to Wisdom Wednesday with Johnny Tiger. Date is May 25th, 2022, Wednesday. Last week, I was talking on the phone with my mom, and we started uh, comparing notes on how expensive grocery is nowadays, as most of you and doubtlessly already uh, been experiencing in this that now because of the war and the pandemic and all this supply chain issues and the gasoline price is going sky high, and that in turn is impacting the price of food items when you go to buy food. Uh, Sometimes you look at when I did my grocery shopping, I was shocked at how expensive a head of cauliflower was. It was $8, $8 Canadian for a head of cauliflower. This is ridiculous. Like I still remember 10 years ago. Yeah, I know, 10 years ago. But I still remember 10 years ago, it was less than $1 for a head of cauliflower, and even then, a lot of people didn't even want to eat it. Anyway, so I was on the phone with my mom, and I told her, I said, this is going ridiculous. This is getting out of hand. When I went to get groceries, I paid $30 for a jug of olive oil. Can you imagine that? And my mom said, "Oh yeah, it's like that here in Taiwan too. It's getting so expensive that my friend who lives next door to us, uh, she's not even buying oil anymore. She just buy fat, fatty pork. She go to the market and she buy fatty pork because most people don't buy fat pork, so it's really cheap, and she make her own oil." I said, "Whoa, that is hardcore! Like actually making your own oil. Like just go buy fatty pork and make your own oil." And my mom said, "Yeah," and she really liked it. She said she hasn't enjoyed lard and rice for a long time. I was like, lard and rice? What the is lard and rice? I mean, I heard of it before. In Mandarin, it's called 猪油拌饭, right? 猪油拌饭 means pork fat, pork grease, and rice. I heard of it before, but I always thought it's something that only happened in movies and in books. Like I never thought people actually eat that. And my mom said, "No, no, no, no. We ate it when we were growing up, meaning my parents. When we were growing up, we ate that all the time. It's delicious. You need to try it sometime." So that led me to doing some research. I'm kind of curious that way. I'm a very curious guy sometimes. And when someone tell me something that just blow my mind like that, such as people actually eat lard and rice, I have to sit down and do some research. And to my surprise, it's a real thing. Yeah, legit, real thing. 猪油拌饭, lard and rice, real thing. Uh, it's not only a real thing, it is one of Taiwan's trademark, like Taiwan's symbolic dishes. That just makes me feel kind of old, kind of awkward because I was born in Taiwan and I grew up there, and to my memory, I never ate it. I never had it, and yet it is one of the most symbolic dishes from Taiwan. When people talk about what dish is famous, what dish is Taiwan famous for, lard and rice is I'm there. That's one of the top picks. I guess that just speaks to how well-to-do, how affluent my family was when I was growing up, how lucky I was when I was growing up that I actually never tried this dish, and I always thought it's something that only happened in movies and books. In fact, lard and rice is so big of a deal in Taiwan that one of the top chefs in Taiwan wrote a book. This book has an interesting title. The book is called "All the Food You Must Try Before You Die. Otherwise, you won't die happy." All the food you must try before you die. Otherwise, you won't die happy. And the top of the list, the number one food that you must try before you die, otherwise you won't die happy, is, you guessed it, 猪油拌饭, lard and rice. So, how do you do this? How do you do this lard and rice? Well, first you need pork fat. Bacon grease work too, by the way. If you guys want, if any of you watching this episode and you say, "Whoa, I need to go try this uh, dish, otherwise I won't die happy." Uh, yeah, I will. We'll talk about how to actually make proper lard or render fat from pork in a little bit. But if you have bacon, just save that bacon grease after you fry your bacon, right? And that will work too. It won't taste exactly the same as a regular lard and rice, 猪油拌饭, because bacon is got all kind of other salt and flavor in them. But it might be good in a different way as well. So how you do this? You need rice, of course. After you cook the rice, you take it out of the rice cooker, nice and hot. Make sure you do this when the rice is nice and hot. It's not going to work on cold rice, okay? And cold rice is going to be friggin' disgusting because fat will congeal when it's cold. When the rice is nice and hot, you put your rice in a bowl, take your spoon, and dig down the middle of the bowl of rice. So you want to make it look a little bit like the top of a volcano with a uh, kind of a ditch in the middle of your rice. Okay, dig a hole in the middle of your rice. Put a tiny tablespoon, like half a tablespoon of pork fat or bacon fat in there. Sprinkle some salt and soy sauce on your rice. Mix in some finely chopped green onion and garlic and give the whole thing a good, honest mix. And take your spoon and just mix the heck out of it. Make sure that you mix it so that all the oil and soy sauce go throughout the rice. And then give that a try. It will be delicious. So how do people render fat from pork? By the way, if you watch this video and then you try it and it end up saving you a lot of money because now you no longer have to spend crazy amount of money buying canola oil or olive oil. You can actually make your own oil at home. You're welcome. You're welcome. Uh, so obviously you need fatty pork. The fattier, the better. Right? The fattier, the better. Better. It takes that fatty pork home, cut it out into tiny chunks. The smaller the better, obviously. Now, fatty pork is really hard to cut. So what you can do is this is what I do is I freeze it first. I freeze it first. So I put it in the freezer and leave it in there and I take it back out when it's not quite frozen solid. It's in that have that consistency of frozen fruit. Okay, that's kind of firm but not rock-like. Okay, let's say half to two-thirds of the way frozen. Take it out, take a nice sharp knife and cut it into tiny slivers. The smaller the better. and then you heat up a big skillet. When the skillet is nice and hot, you throw these fatty pork pieces in there and start frying. As you fry, you will notice that it's look like you're getting less and less meat, and there's just a whole lot of oil. That's good. That's what we're looking for. Okay, keep frying, keep frying, keep frying until the what's left in the oil don't even look like meat anymore. They're these golden brown crumbs, like bacon bits. They're hard and crunchy. Then that's when you know you're done. Then you take a strainer or filter. You filter the oil into a jar. Keep a lid on it. Put it in your fridge, and then whenever you're cooking, you just take a spoon and dig some out and dig some out. Honestly, I do that with bacon. Every time I fry bacon, I save bacon grease this way. It's really good for using in your cooking. And it does cut down on having to buy oil, especially when oil is so expensive right now. What do you do with the little crumbs, little bits of dried out, shriveled, crunchy, burned pork? Don't throw that away. That's quite a delicacy, actually, for Chinese people and Taiwanese people for quite a long time. People used to keep those in a dish, in a glass dish, and sprinkle some salt over it, and then just keep it in the kitchen. Whenever you're eating rice and you need a little bit of a meat flavor, you sprinkle some of that on your rice. If you're making pancakes and you want a little bit of a meatiness in your pancake, you take a scoop of that uh, pork bits, bacon bits, saying that those crumb, and mix it in with your dough. Or a lot of children actually just like to snack on those, sort of like potato chips. This leftover pork crumbs was so popular as a snack that professional uh, grease and oil making factories that uh, did pork, that use pork to make oil, actually saved them and put them in the machine and compress them into, well, basically the size of an Oreo cookie, just this round, solid piece of uh, pork crumb, bacon bits. And people used to buy them, and you take them home, you rehydrate it with some hot water and soy sauce, and just eat it like that, or eat it with rice. It's very delicious. That might be one of the earliest examples of Chinese hamburger patty. So some people would say, well, this sounds so unhealthy. Like, how is it that Chinese people and Taiwanese people can eat this stuff without everyone getting a heart attack and clogged artery? Well, the reason is back then when lard and rice, 猪油拌饭, was a big thing, it was after the Second World War where uh, quite frankly, not everybody could afford meat. And even families that had money, meat was heavily regulated by the government. So even if you could afford it, you couldn't buy more than you were allowed. And for example, you would have food stamps the government give you for meat, food stamp government give you for oil. If you're only allowed food stamp for a pound of meat a month, that's all you can get. It doesn't matter how rich you are. If you don't have the food stamp, they couldn't sell it to you. So this is to say that back then, Taiwanese people and Chinese people didn't eat a lot of meat. Honestly, when my father was growing up, I remember him telling me that for him, meat was something that only happened on special occasions, uh, like New Year's and birthdays and funerals. Most of the time, you get vegetable and fruit and rice and hard-boiled egg. And my father did not grow up in a poor family. My father grew up in a pretty well-to-do family. So if even his family had to go through this, I imagine for poor people, even the hard-boiled egg would be out of the question. So back then, when people didn't get that much meat, eating something like lard and rice wasn't not really a big deal because you're not getting enough uh, protein and grease and fat in your system. So eating something like this was pretty perfect, actually. Now, I wouldn't recommend you eating this regularly nowadays. I imagine nowadays we can have meat 3 meals a day and every day of the week. So eating something like this might actually do something nasty to your cholesterol if you eat too much of it. The principle of eating animal fat mixed with rice goes all the way back to the Zhou dynasty, which is about 3,000 years ago. Just imagine that 3,000 years ago in China, during the time of the Zhou dynasty, the emperors of the Zhou dynasty had 8 dishes that have to appear every time they uh, had meal, every time they ate. There's 8 dishes that always have to be there. One is raw ground meat. They take meat and then smash it down until it's like ground beef, and then they serve it raw like that. Uh, another one was meat marinated in salt and soy sauce and ginger and all that stuff. Again, you eat it raw, like sashimi. There's barbecue meat. That's a third dish. And I won't bore you with all 8 of them because I don't know what the other ones were. Anyway, but one of the most important and most interesting one uh, that we are going to look at is called chuan shan. What was the chuan shan dish? Chuan shan dish was rice, vegetable, meat, and the most important, mixed in with rendered fat from either pork, goat, or cattle. So you see, even 3,000 years ago, the emperor himself wanted to eat lard and rice. In fact, animal fat was the earliest form of Chinese people using oil. It's last like that's mostly all what Chinese people used was animal fat for cooking and other purposes. This went on until the Han Dynasty about 2,100 years ago, and when more and more Chinese people became Buddhist, using animal fat was no longer quite as acceptable for in Buddhism. So people started switching over to canola oil and sesame oil and other form of vegetable oil. But it wasn't until another 1,000 years in the Song dynasty when Chinese people almost as universally converted over to vegetable oil. Because Song dynasty was when China lost a lot of its land to its invading neighbors. So we didn't have a lot of land to raise animals and cattle and stuff like that. So we barely had enough animals for meat. We definitely didn't have enough animal if people wanted to use animal fat for oil. So more people uh, converted over to using vegetable oil. When it comes to vegetable oils, there were two major distinctions. Sesame oils exclusively were used for cooking and, uh, hate to say this, uh, for perfume and hair product. People back then, when they comb their hair, they like to add a little bit of sesame oil onto their hair to keep the hair in shape. That was an early form of, I guess, mousse. or gel, hair gel for Chinese people. So I guess back then a lot of people walk around smelling like sesame oil. Other kind of oil, like peanut oil, canola oil, etc., etc. People didn't want to eat them. People didn't like the taste. So those form of oil were mostly reserved for using as lubricant for wheels on a wagon, for building, and for to make glue and paint and other materials like that. If you watch this episode and do go give it a try, you try your 猪肉拌饭 or lard on rice, is my recommendation. And if you like it, please let me know in the comment section. Now, if you have heart problem and high blood pressure, then I recommend you just give it a pass. Thank you for checking out today's Wisdom Wednesday. We'll be back again tomorrow for Toy Thursday. For now, 谢谢 and 再见.